Welcome back to the 7 Minutes podcast, the video games podcast that is 7 minutes and maybe a little longer. I am your host, number one, Zack.
Whoa, what makes you number one?
Just because I'm the first to announce it. You could have introduced yourself as host number one last week.
So, and the week before?
Sounds like some control issues going on right here.
I am first among equals. The greatest, the one and only Zack Fernaka. And one or the other of you can introduce yourselves, or I can wing it, and you'll probably be disappointed at the result.
Sorry.
I'm Robert Marrujo, the editor-in-chief of NintenDojo.com. I love Nintendo games, and that's my primary focus as a gamer and gaming historian. And guess that's about it.
I'm Angela. Welcome back. I am a staff writer for NintenDojo, as you know. I'm a gaming enthusiast. And I like to play games.
Very cool, very cool. All right. This week we are talking about the Game Boy Advance, which is turning 20 years old this month. Maybe not today exactly, depending on the release date of this podcast, but thereabouts. We, I'm sure, are going to cover our favorite games, maybe even our favorite model of Game Boy Advance.
Oh, yeah.
There were a few.
You mean the Game Boy Micro? Okay.
The Game Boy Micro, the SP. Might even cover the Game Boy Player, honestly. This could cover a lot of ground. And there will also be, for the first time, some trivia questions that I'll be posing to my co-hosts, and we'll see who is the ultimate gamer between the two of them. Okay. But I figure we should probably kick things off just kind of talking about the Game Boy Advance and kind of its significance, what it was in context, what it kind of meant for the industry, and what it means looking back. So, in researching this episode, getting the trivia ready, I realized there's actually quite a bit about the Game Boy Advance, which was unique among Nintendo handhelds or even gaming systems in general. For starters, I believe it is the last system that doesn't have an operating system. You just turn it on. If there's a game cartridge in there, it runs. Mm-hmm. If not, it just gives you the startup sound. Mm-hmm. That's it. The DS, the PSP, the Wii, everything that came out afterwards has an operating system that you navigate and set the clock, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of a holdover from a simpler time. Mm-hmm. I think it's the last system to not have Wi-Fi or internet connectivity out of the box. Obviously, it had the adapter you could plug into the back, but untethered, simple. It was the last of the 3 Nintendo handhelds that had the Game Boy moniker, that could play games from as far back as the 80s, and that had its top-selling game be a Pokemon. Pokemon has remained a big seller, but it was those 3 systems where the Pokemon game was the biggest attraction. And of course, in addition to those first, it was at the time, and Robert, we actually talked about this last week, of the kind of fading in prominence of 2D gaming, pixel-based gaming, until the Xbox Live Arcade and indie games kind of hit the scene in the mid-2000s. But the Game Boy Advance had been the last child of the 90s, carrying forward pixel art. Older series that had made the jump were still putting out 2D entries. You still have the 2D Castlevanias, the 2D Mega Mans, the 2D Metroids. So it's kind of significant as it's kind of, even though it came out in the 2000s, I think, or was it 99?
No, I think Game Boy Color was 99.
Yeah, it was 98 or 99. Right, I think, Game Boy Advance is 2001. Even though it came out in the 2000s, though, it does
Game Boy Advance was definitely 2000s. It also has that very 2000s-y look of the future. About it.
Yeah. But in some ways, it does feel like a continuation of the 90s. Like the 90s gaming kind of held over into the 2000s as long as the Game Boy Advance was around.
Yeah, I think Game Boy Advance is interesting because, I mean, for one thing, as a kid, I didn't realize that Game Boy Color was like, I guess not completely seen as a new piece of hardware. I mean, it's essentially just Game Boy a little bit souped up, and obviously there's the color, but when you get to the Game Boy Advance, it is a true evolutionary leap. Mm-hmm. I think it has a 32 megabyte processor, is that right? Something like that? 32-bit?
Oh, I didn't research that, but I can believe it.
I'm pretty sure it's more powerful than one would think, but I guess the thing that sucks about Game Boy Advance is I love Game Boy Advance. It might be my second favorite of Nintendo's consoles because my first is the DS. But it's probably representative of one of the least experimental periods for Nintendo when it comes to making games. Because, it gets billed as a port-heavy console, and I would say that's fair. Like, almost, at least half of what Nintendo put out on that system was ports?
Like, that presented even as like a portable Super Nintendo, in terms of like how game journalists talked about it.
I mean, it just immediately comes to mind, you've got Zelda 2, because they have those NES classics that they re-released. Yoshi's Island, I think.
Yeah, the whole Super Mario Advance.
All the Super Mario
Advance series.
F-Zero.
Link to the Past. Yeah.
And it wasn't just Nintendo either, right?
And even, I mentioned these in the previous episode talking about Pokemon, the remakes of, Red and Blue, Red and Green.
Well, I mean, when it comes to those, though, like, I think, so, like, I said half, and I'm doing very rough math here, as in no math at all, it's just guesstimating, but there are bright spots, though. So, like, I wish there was more experimentation, but then you do get games like Drill Dozer, the evolution of the Pokemon series, so many quality of life tweaks that came for that franchise in particular because of Game Boy Advance. The two Metroid games, so Fusion and Zero Mission.
These are all still like sequels. They're not ports, but they are still...
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is the good stuff. Like, there are things that stand out as not being ports and bringing you true new content.
I don't think you're giving me enough credit, frankly. I'm not saying they were as experimental on like the DS era, but Nintendo was putting out like WarioWare, Rhythm Tengoku, Orbital, Dot Stream. Like, there was
Kirby's Pinball, Game Boy Advance game.
I'm
thinking of something.
But there are two Kirby games on it that are pretty good.
Yeah.
What's Orbital?
That was one of the that series of 7 games that it had like a Wii port layer called like Orbit or something. It was like this gravitational game.
Nintendo made this?
Yeah.
I'm writing this down because I didn't know.
Yeah, sure.
So for those who do not know, I obsessively collect pretty much anything Nintendo. There's all sorts of games I'll collect that aren't Nintendo, but in particular, I love finding stuff that I didn't know Nintendo made. So I'm writing this right now, Orbital.
Yeah, but anyhow, I can't let it entirely pass as calling the Nintendo's Game Boy Advance library, like, non-experimental when they did have both WarioWare, which is kind of a crazy game, and then WarioWare Twisted, which took an already crazy game and added a gyro sensor to it.
That's what I was thinking of when I was asking about Kirby, because I was just thinking of like the gyro sensor games that came out on Game Boy Advance and how interesting that was.
But I mean, it definitely, like, Robert's right that it can't be denied that there were a lot of ports and sequels of existing like 16-bit games that came out on the Game Boy Advance, and that's part of its appeal, frankly.
Yeah, maybe experimental isn't quite the word I should be using. Like, I guess when I look back at Game Boy Advance, I'm disappointed because there's no new Mario game, with the exception of Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which I love. I thought that game was just such a brilliant use of the that control scheme they came up with, because it felt in some ways like a 3D Mario, where you could do like the handstands and side flips, but
was Mario and Luigi not on the Game Boy?
That was on there. And
I don't want to give you a hard time, but I do think it's funny that you saying they were not experimental enough, and then you're just talking about sequels. Like Mario and Donkey Kong is like a sequel to like Donkey Kong 94, right? And Metroid Fusion and Zero Mission are obviously sequels to Super Metroid. Like, this is not experimental. Like, obviously there's things that are different.
Well, that's why I said I think that was the wrong choice of words.
Sure.
But I don't know. Like, keep in mind, I love the ports. I mean, I think the last podcast we were talking about the Donkey Kong Country trilogy and how it's on Game Boy Advance, I played the hell out of those games, and I still play them on my Game Boy Advance. And then, like, I remember really enjoying how Mario Kart on Game Boy Advance, not only was it portable Mario Kart, but that's the last Super Nintendo style Mario Kart we get, and it includes all the tracks from the first Mario Kart. So it's like a double game. You have all the tracks that are Super Circuit, and then it's like, oh, and by the way, here's everything from the original, but with these newer graphics.
I feel like that game doesn't get a lot, in terms of when Mario Kart is discussed, I feel like that game doesn't get a lot of love.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more old school because it's in that mold of the original game. But if we do want to talk about experimental, we did see the Game Boy Advance to GameCube connectivity stuff. And, like, not all of it was great, but it was pretty interesting. Like, with Four Swords Adventure, you could each use the Game Boy Advance, and it would go from being on the screen into your Game Boy. I think Crystal Chronicles also had that, right?
Crystal Chronicles definitely did.
Games like Wario Land on GameCube actually let you download mini-games into the system. And as long as you kept the system on, you could play certain mini-games, and then if you turned it off, they'd go away.
All right. Let me jump in here with Marrujo Trivia Showdown Part 1.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, God.
All right. So you are both able to buzz in as well. Just answer.
In the tradition of the great Ben Maller, I would say our buzzer is our name. So say your name, and that means you're answering.
Okay. Angela, you okay with it?
That's fine.
Okay. Number 1. What is Afterburner?
Robert. Afterburner is a racing game, right? No, Afterburner is the jet fighter game.
That is an Afterburner, but in the context of the Game Boy Advance, that is not what I'm looking for.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, some sort of pirating software.
Angela, you might be a little closer, but not exactly. Afterburner was the fairly common hardware modification to install a front light on the original Game Boy Advance.
Oh, don't get me started on that sacrilege.
All right, the score is 0-0.
You know what? We're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, I think we should.
The desecration of old hardware. Continue.
Oh, okay.
Number 2. In what third-party Game Boy Advance game does a floor rug resembling a skinned Pikachu appear?
Robert. I'm going to totally guess and say it's Mother 3.
It's not Mother 3.
All right.
Which I think also not count as third-party, but that's okay.
Oh, you said third-party. Dang.
Which is what makes it especially
Half
egregious,
listening.
right? The answer is Mega Man Battle Network 3.
Oh, look at these guys being feisty. Where's the Battle Network series now, Capcom? Oh, that's right. Nowhere.
Okay, right. Maybe something a little easier. Let me dial it down a little. The end of part 1 of trivia. 4 classic Mario games were released in the Mario Advance series, but not in chronological order, which 4 games and in what order were they released on GBA?
Robert. So you got Mario 2. You got Yoshi's Island. Mario Brothers 3. Oh, I take that back. It was Mario Brothers 2, Mario World, Yoshi's Island, and then Mario Brothers 4. Or Mario Brothers 3.
Okay, you got that. All right, 1 point for Robert. We have a Marrujo on the board. We'll get back to more of this later.
All right. So, really quickly, because it came up and it's important, I hate people who take Game Boy Advances and they completely redo the shell, paint crap on them. I don't care how beautiful it looks. Like, I've seen people do it to everything. NESs get this treatment, SNESs. These consoles aren't being made anymore.
Right, so make them better. Cherish the ones that we have.
No, so now you have this whole crowd of people who scrounged for them to get their hands on them. Mm-hmm. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where there's hardly any left that are just stock. And then you get Mr. Art Experiment, with this, look, it glows green, how the screen is lit up. It's like, oh, God, leave it alone.
I'd like to buy one just to salvage it.
Irreplaceable.
To restore it.
You are both being ridiculous, obviously, especially Robert, but you're both being ridiculous. People will mod these to have a better screen, like an IPS screen,
Then buy, something else. I've got no sympathy. Buy an SP.
The SP does not have a screen as bright as an IPS screen.
Big deal.
Okay.
Where's my little violin?
Well, here's my proposal, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
You do whatever you want with your own possession.
No, see, but this is the thing. It's going to get to the point where if I want a regular old Game Boy Advance, every clown in the world has modded them, transformed them, ruined them.
Then you should prioritize buying those instead of all the ridiculous tchotchkes and Pokemon cards you currently buy.
I managed to do both things.
You cannot control other people, nor should you aspire to.
I'll aspire to getting my hands on as many Game Boys as I can.
On the subject of backlights, though. Obviously, the first version of the Game Boy Advance did not have a backlight. The SP did. Micro did as well. This might be a good opportunity to talk about different hardware revisions of the GBA.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you. I started with the SP. I think, Robert, Little Bird told me that you jumped in earlier.
Oh, yes. I had the Toys R Us exclusive black Game Boy Advance.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. See, I knew you had that. I was telling Zack about that. But I told him because you have such a big collection, I couldn't remember if the black one was one that you had as an adult or one that you had as a kid when we were kids.
So I had that. My second Game Boy Advance was the black SP. And then for the Micro, I got the Famicom version. Now, I think that the best design for the Game Boy Advance was the first one. Because it had, think about it, that's the orientation that the PSP and the Vita had, and that's technically the orientation of Switch. So it's the wide setup.
All it needed was a backlit IPS screen.
Yep.
It would have been perfect.
You didn't have the Arctic purple one?
Oh, I have it now.
But you didn't have that when we were kids?
No.
Huh. I guess the black one is really good.
Did you get a black one too?
The regular Game Boy Advance?
Mm-hmm.
No, my first Game Boy Advance was an SP, the silver SP.
Oh, so you never had a plain one?
I never had a plain one. I still don't have a regular Game Boy Advance.
Me either.
I don't know why.
I have fun pulling that thing out, though, and playing it, the way you're supposed to. Find the light source and sit under it. It's actually not that bad. But I do wish Nintendo had officially thrown a light into it, but that's just me.
Just take matters into your own hands.
I'm not discussing this again with you. I'm going to find all these modders and give them a stern talk.
Do you remember what the first game you got was for the Game Boy Advance? Or what you got the Game Boy Advance?
I have a feeling, because up until 2004, I wasn't really buying anything. Well, I started buying games probably by the time I was a teenager. But the Game Boy Advance, that would have been when I was middle school age. I guess I would have been about 14. I just know I got it for a gift. And then I don't even really remember what that game was that came with it. I might have got Mario Brothers 2, Super Mario Advance 1, Mario Brothers 2, whatever stupid game name they gave it. And that's not necessarily like my favorite Mario game, but to me what was cool was that I could take all the old Game Boy games and just plug them into it too. So even though I didn't have a lot of games that were new to play, it's like, well, I could still play everything I already had. So that was a definite plus. Frankly, with the SP, it's still one of the things I love about that console, which is, as I get older, it's a little harder to see. And I think also the screens just sort of deteriorate because it can't just be that my vision was that much sharper when I was 14. Because I would play for hours with no backlight. Mm-hmm. But now if I try to do the same thing, it's a little harder to see it. And so the lifesaver for me is I can take all my Game Boy games and just throw them into the SP and boom, it's lit up. So, anyway.
Do you have one of the newer SPs? I think there was a second generation that was brighter.
Yes, so I think the way it goes is that the first gen was backlit, and then I think the later gen was frontlit or reverse. One of the two of those came first, and whatever came after was brighter.
Yeah.
And I don't think I own one of the later ones.
All right.
I have blue and black. For the SP. For the SP.
For the SP, I've since collected others like, you found me the Pikachu one. Mm-hmm. That might be the only other SP I have, I think.
Did you get the clamshell Zelda one too, or no?
The gold one?
Yeah. I know you have the DS version of it.
No, I think I just have the DS version. I don't... Wait a minute. Didn't it come with a game? Did it come with Minish Cap?
Might have.
I might actually have the clamshell gold Zelda one. But, so my first Game Boy Advance was the clamshell silver SP. And then the Micro came out, and they had announced the Famicom one. And so I asked, we were well beyond Santa and believing in Santa at this point, but we'd still write Christmas lists for our parents for the convenience of knowing what we wanted for Christmas. And so I had put the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Micro on my list. And I remember, my dad was honest, and he said, I saw you put the Game Boy on your list, and just want to be honest with you and let you know we might not be able to afford it. And, I said, it's fine. I'm not going to be upset over it. Totally understand. And so Christmas morning came, and we opened all of our gifts, and, my parents are big on the grand finale gift, the thing they want you to open last. And so we had opened everything. There was nothing left under the tree, and it was a nice Christmas. But then our dad said we each had one more gift, and parents pull out, these two wrapped gifts, and we open them up, and they're Game Boy Micros. And I started crying because I knew that they must have tried really hard to get those for us. But it was funny because they gave Robert the Famicom one.
Well, you're misremembering this a little bit. You were the only one who got a Micro that year.
I thought you got a Micro.
No, you got a Micro, and you got the black one.
I do remember the black one.
That's the one you got.
That's the one I got. I know.
I didn't get the Famicom one until later. It was either for my birthday or like the next Christmas or something, but we didn't get them at the same time.
Interesting. But yeah, I did not get the Famicom one, but Robert got the Famicom one later, but I didn't care that it wasn't the Famicom one. There's a lot of, I will never get rid of that. I'm not going to get rid of anything in my collection, but especially not that Micro. I have a lot of, it means a lot to me. But then Robert was kind enough, and he didn't have to, but kind enough years later to give me the Famicom one that he got. So now I have both. But that Game Boy Micro, I took that with me everywhere. And had it with me a lot in high school, playing Pokemon Leaf Green on that thing. For me, I really like that model the best because I have small hands. And so it's an extra comfortable for me to play with that little tiny one. And I like small things. And so it worked out really well to have that in my backpack. And yeah.
Yeah, I've always thought people were kind of overly critical of the micro because, I mean, I don't have super small hands. I don't have giant man hands. I think I have fairly average hands, and I never have any problems playing with it. I still play it to this day. I thought the micro was cool because it was just so... I mean, the Game Boy is already portable, but like that thing just slips so easily into a pocket. I was especially happy because I found a faux leather sleeve that you put the micro into. And it makes it look super sophisticated and fancy. And
I think you might be overestimating how sophisticated.
Well, it was enough that
leather sleeve Game Boy Micro look.
Well, every time I pulled it out, people thought it was a phone. You know, then it's like, no, this is my micro, because this is before the flat screen phones we all have now. But man, I love the micro. There's something about it. The only defect it has in my eyes is that you can't put Game Boy games into it. But it's so small, it would be pretty awkward with that much cartridge sticking out. But this made me think of a memory, even though it's technically not a Game Boy Advance memory. It's a Game Boy memory. There was controversy when we got our Game Boy Colors. Now, I don't believe my parents and my Aunt Linda coordinated. I believe it was just pure coincidence that Christmas, my mom and dad bought a Game Boy Color, and it was the pink one. And I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be like Angela and I were going to share it, but it was ostensibly my Game Boy Color. Then we go to our grandma's house, and Angela opens up her own Game Boy Color, and it's a green one. And man, because mine was the pink, just by default swapped them. But I remember Angela liked the green; she wanted the green. But it didn't work out.
Plus, Robert's favorite color is green. So, and it ended up working out anyways. My favorite color is red, and it was that kind of hot pink, kind of more like a magenta. So it had kind of some red tones in it. So
this is great. This saves us the trouble of having to do a Game Boy Color episode.
Oh.
I wasn't really looking forward to it because I never owned a Game Boy Color.
Bad job by you.
I went straight from the original brick Game Boy to the Game Boy Advance SP.
So you missed out on the Color Dungeon in Links to the Past DX. You missed out on the Oracle games.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I eventually...
You missed out on Pokemon Crystal.
Played some of the games that you're talking about. I didn't pick up a GBA when it launched. And then the SP came out, and I got excited by that. I liked the form factor. Thought it looked pretty cool. And it was hard to get a hold of, at least... For me, when it came out, I ended up having to order one off of eBay. Order the silver one off of eBay. And they shipped the wrong one, so I ended up with a cobalt blue.
Mm.
And I ended up keeping it because the timing of the eBay order and the delivery was so that I would have it for a trip that I was going to be going on. So I was like, well, I'm not going to go through the trouble of sending this back and than not having a Game Boy for the trip. So I started with the SP. The Cobalt Blue. I eventually got there was an NES 8-bit edition version of the SP. Got that. So that was my most used Game Boy Advance. And eventually,
I wanted that version when it came out.
Yeah.
The NES.
Yeah.
SP.
It's pretty cool. There's nice texture on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Super slick.
I actually don't. I remember that one. I remember not wanting it.
Really?
Something about it didn't work for me aesthetically. I remember being in a GameStop, seeing it in their... they had it used for sale, and technically could have bought it if I wanted. I was like,
I wanted the chrome red one, or I guess you could call it chrome, more like a metallic kind of wannabe metallic sheen. That this is one of the things that I miss about Nintendo handhelds. This is a tiny bit of a segue, but I play my Switch almost exclusively in TV mode. I just don't have any interest in playing it portable. But I love the Nintendo handhelds, all of them. I grew up on them. I constantly had one with me. But part of the appeal for me were the different limited edition versions that would come out and all the different designs and the colors and the patterns. Whether you're talking about, the SP or the DSs, especially too, once I was in college and my first job, I was working at GameStop. And so, I'd always be on the up and up about the different ones that were coming out. And there is a pattern, actually, of every time Nintendo came out with a new handheld, I held out until a special edition came out. I didn't get the DS until that Mario Kart bundle came out. That was the red original DS. I didn't get a DS Lite until the bundle that had, I think Phantom Hourglass came out, and it's the gold DS with the Triforce on it. I didn't get a 3DS until the bundle came out with Ocarina of Time. That is one of my most cherished possessions, is that black 3DS with the Zelda design on the trim, on the lid. Even like a Wii U. I didn't get a Wii U until the Wind Waker bundle came out. For the Wii, I didn't get one until the red Wii came out. So I have this habit of I waited. I consistently waited until special edition versions of the handhelds and then later the consoles came out.
So I realize there hasn't really been a special edition version of the Switch in the same way.
No.
But also you didn't wait. Right?
No.
You got the Switch at launch.
It's because, there was no way I wasn't going to get the Switch at launch. But also, I don't know why, and maybe I was correct in feeling this way. I just kind of had this feeling it's not going to be the same. Because, it's one big screen. Mm-hmm. The only special thing that...
Yeah, we've just been selling the Joy-Cons.
The Joy-Cons, and then, of course, the dock itself. But,
right. There's a couple different variations. There's the Animal Crossing, the Pokemon one, the Smash Bros. One.
You're talking about,
Switch variants?
No. What I'm saying is it's not the same as the handhelds where the design is on the handheld. The designs primarily have been on the docks, and that's...
Well, that's not totally true, because the Switch, the Pikachu Switch, the pattern's all over the back. Mm-hmm. The Smash Bros. One doesn't have anything.
But neither does Animal Crossing, right?
I thought the Animal Crossing one does have stuff on the back.
Well, I don't know.
I know that the Mario one that just came out is all red,
yes.
Which is really just a color variant.
It's just a color variant. But that's why I said primarily these designs are not actually on the Switch themselves, and it's on the back. And granted, with a DS or SP or whatever, same kind of thing. You're not looking at the design when it's flipped open, but it's just not the same. It doesn't have that same feel and that same appeal as the handhelds.
Yeah. I got a Micro too, and I mentioned my SPs, and eventually got a Micro. So I got a Micro too. I had the two SPs and eventually got the Micro. I almost got the one for Final Fantasy IV Advance. I think I actually bought a special edition of Final Fantasy IV Advance with the Game Boy Micro. I think it was a single pack. But what happened is I got home, I hadn't opened it yet, and I started reading reviews and online complaints about the quality of the port and decided I didn't want to commit to it, so I returned it without having opened it. I did eventually get a Micro to keep, which was the one from Mother 3. I picked that up on a trip to Japan.
It's really cool.
I really, really wish I had... Well, I don't really have the money, which is part of the reason, but it's impossible now to find some of those color variants for the Micro. They're interesting because they're, of course, they're locked to certain countries, but you could just play any Game Boy Micro anywhere. But there's a green version of it, purple, almost any color you can think of, and then the Mother one that Zack's talking about.
Of course, any one person only needs a single Game Boy, so I got rid of everything except that Micro.
Oh my God,
terrible.
But I will say, Robert, I think you're right when you're talking earlier about people do complain about the size or the ergonomics of the Micro. But the thing is, yeah, the micro is too small if you try to kind of clutch it tightly. But it's so light, you barely have to touch it to hold it. So you can hold your hands in a more ergonomic spaced out pattern. And I always found it was super comfy. Like the D-pad is way comfier than the other GBAs or most handhelds or controllers, frankly.
Yeah, one of the interesting things we haven't touched on with the micro was the changeable faceplates.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, I remember Nintendo really hyping that up.
Did you ever change your faceplates, or did you just kind of like the idea?
I liked the idea because like Robert had mentioned earlier, my first and original micro was the one with the black body, and I had this silver faceplate on, and I think that came with two other faceplates, and one of them was one that had I think a ladybug on some flowers or something like that. But
I must correct you.
Yeah.
And myself, I think. We both might have gotten micros that same year.
Well,
no, let me... my whole point, though, is that you have the silver body with the black faceplate, and that's the one I always wanted.
That is right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I still don't have that one. It makes me jealous.
Yeah. So I also liked the idea that you could change faceplates and never did it. And then I got an original or the new Nintendo 3DS with the swappable faceplates. I haven't changed the faceplate on that either. It's a cool idea, but
no. So I think Micro failed because the variants were garbagey. Because like Angela was saying, you had the ladybug one or whatever.
It's kind of generic.
That kind of nebula looking one too. Mm-hmm. None of them were cool. Mm-mm. But the new 3DS, well, here's the thing: you had to get them from Japan if you wanted the good ones. Because I got the wood grain with Kirby.
Mm-hmm. It's such a good one.
This is not the 3DS episode.
Just saying.
So
yeah.
Okay.
Related.
You're the one who brought it up, Al.
It's true. What I'm hearing is it's time for round 2 of Marrujo trivia.
Oh boy.
Ready?
See if I can add to my 1 point.
Okay. Remember, call out your name when you're ready to make an attempt. The GBA game, known in the West simply as Fire Emblem, is actually what number Fire Emblem game?
Angela.
Yes.
This is a guess. Purely a guess. 3.
That is not correct.
Robert, I'm going to guess it's the 4th.
Also way off.
Oh, man. Is it the 12th?
The 7th.
Oh.
7th. We think it was the first Fire Emblem.
Yeah. And I believe Roy comes from 6. He's from one that wasn't actually localized, at least originally. That was the first one on GBA. The second one on GBA is one with Lynn, I think her name is. Mm-hmm. And that's the one that got ported over as Fire Emblem, if I recall correctly. I could be wrong. I don't like Fire Emblem. Anyhow, next question. The director of the Super Nintendo game Super Mario RPG went on to direct 2 Game Boy Advance games. Name one.
Robert?
Yeah?
I'm going to guess again. Was it Mario and Luigi?
That was one of them. Yeah. For double credit, can one of you name the other one? Okay. The other one was called Tomato Adventure.
Tomato Adventure. That's getting added to the list right now.
It's Japan only. It doesn't even have a fan translation. So
I'm still going to Google it.
All right, and last one for this round. The rare game, It's Mr. Pants, was originally announced with a different title. What was that title, and why was the title changed?
I know Mr. Pants. I don't know this story. I still need to get Mr. Pants.
Okay. I cannot say what I think the new title. Part of this question was what was the name changed to?
What was that changed from?
What was it changed from? Yeah, I don't know what it was changed from. I would just guess that maybe it was either considered inappropriate or was easy to make inappropriate, like Puckman.
No. So no one's getting points for this, but let me try and nudge you in the correct direction. The developer was Rare, which actually has 2 hints, both in terms of what they might have been working on a game for.
I mean, was something having to do with Banjo-Kazooie? Banjo wears pants?
No. But, okay, so
Shorts, excuse me.
Okay. The original name was Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers. Then they got bought by Microsoft and lost the ability to use the Donkey Kong license. Mm-hmm. So it was repurposed into a different IP, which is why they just stumbled on this obviously terrible idea of a character of Mr. Pants. So that's how we got It's Mr. Pants. It was supposed to be Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers.
That's funny. Though, well, I guess because I believe, if I remember correctly, it might be all of them, with maybe the exception of the first one. But I think the last two Donkey Kong Country games are technically THQ, though it's rare. But I think they were... I just remember THQ had something to do with Rare and their Game Boy Advance games, because that's right when they got shuttled off to Microsoft, and that was the end of them. But they had these Game Boy Advance ports, because like something about the nature of the Microsoft deal didn't prohibit them from making these games for Game Boy Advance, but there was something about the publishing that was, I don't know. I have to look into this more. I might be giving you all complete misinformation.
Oh, that's okay.
I think that it's kind of become the hallmark of this podcast is not just flying by the seat of our pants, but guessing things on the fly. Like, I think I heard this once.
There's going to be some poor fool who goes to tell his friends, did you hear about Rare and THQ back in the early 2000s? His friends slap him. That's not real.
Misinforming the masses.
Yeah, we actually got a listener from Canada, according to the analytics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. One? So far.
So one listener, and he's from Canada. A new podcast, eh?
All right.
We're talking to you, Canada.
Let's discuss it directly. What are our favorites? What's your favorite original game?
The only answer to either question is Saberwolf.
What's your favorite port or sequel? However you want to break it down, because the system does have a reputation as a ports machine, right? Mm-hmm. Some of those ports are really good, or they might just be serviceable but for a game you love. There are also like sequels to existing franchises. Some of those are great. And then there's like real off the wall stuff like Robert mentioning Drill Dozer or me mentioning WarioWare, mm-hmm. right? So
yeah. The Game Boy Advance has a lot going for it. I think my favorite game on that handheld might be Pokemon Leaf Green, because I love the original Pokemon games in Gen 1 so much. So it was really cool having this really formative game of my childhood, remade with more advanced graphics, and so that might be my favorite. But there are some incredible games. The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, which I do think does not get talked about enough. It doesn't get enough credit.
That's because it came out right at the end. Yeah. They were already transitioning to DS, so it was kind of overlooked.
That was a weird thing about the GBA.
Really a shame.
Actually, is that the GBA came out in 2001, and the DS came out in 2004, and there was a lot of overlap between the two. Whereas, there was 6 years between the DS and the 3DS, right? Like, it's a much longer reign. The GBA's was only GBA was King of the Hill for a much shorter period of time.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I just had something in my head. Oh, the Metroid games, Fusion and Zero Mission. I remember borrowing Robert's copy of Fusion. Yeah, it was Fusion, and I had a lot of fun with that game. Really solid overall. Robert, that's the one where you have those moments where your armor is stalking around by itself, right?
Yeah, SAX.
Yeah, it's creepy. It's a really neat moment though. It sticks out in my head when I remember my memories of playing that game.
It is a cool concept, and given Metroid's inspiration in the Alien franchise, it makes sense that they would go in kind of a horror direction mm-hmm. for a lot of the sequels. Mm-hmm. I did not particularly like Fusion. You will be rolling your eyes when I tell you I thought there was too much talking. I preferred Zero Mission, definitely. But,
I actually would say I agree with you. I actually did prefer Zero Mission myself at the time, but Fusion had some really cool moments, and that was definitely one of them. Interestingly, even though I didn't love these games, Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire were on the Game Boy Advance, and while they are definitely not my favorite gen, I just have some nostalgia when I think back on those games. I remember having, the secret base, which I always thought was really cool. I wanted my own real life secret base, and there's something about those games that definitely makes me think of like my early teenage years. There are just so many games on Game Boy Advance. It's just a really solid console for me, handheld for me.
It's a good library, and it would be. I mean, some of the most beloved Game Boy Advance games didn't even come out in the U.S. We didn't have Mother 3. We eventually got the Phoenix Wright games, but not until the DS, right? Like it was honestly like a pretty deep library.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite Game Boy Advance possessions is somebody was taking the fan translation of Mother 3, and they were cobbling together English cartridges where it's the game and it has the patched over English, and it's actually on a GBA game pack.
It's like a repro card.
Yeah. I freaking love that. I wish somebody would do that for the Phoenix Wright games.
Well, you could just get a flash card. For my sake, talking about my own preferences, I did not like I eventually tried and did not like Final Fantasy IV Advance, which I played Final Fantasy IV to death on the Super Nintendo, the original Super Famicom version, an emulator that played the Wonder Swan version. I bought a Wonder Swan so I could play Final Fantasy IV on the go. And the GBA version is just kind of buggy in ways that ruin the game for somebody who really knows it inside and out. I remember Edward getting double turns all the time, which is like not a bad thing if one of your playable characters gets an extra turn, but I had like a whole rhythm. I just threw it off. It just didn't work as a port for me. But the other two Final Fantasy ports on that system I really adored. 6 is kind of a cinematic game, so it loses a little bit in the smaller form factor, but 5 is just like a perfect on-the-go RPG. I was a big fan of. There were like 3 treasure games on that system I really loved. Astro Boy Omega Factor, which is like a fully new thing. And then 2 sequels to existing Treasure games, which at the time I think were new for Treasure. I don't think Treasure had done sequels to their existing games until Advanced Guardian Heroes and Gunstar Superheroes. I'm not going to say either of those is as good as the original, but they're both really good. And I remember with Advanced Guardian Heroes in particular, which is the one that kind of gets shit on by people. I apologize for the foul language. Trying to keep this mostly family friendly. Gets crapped on by most people. It's not as impressive looking a game, but it's got this really kind of forward-thinking counter mechanic where like parrying and like counter moves in games became more common after the fact. But at the time, it was like pretty unusual that you would have like a defensive maneuver that if you timed correctly would like open up an enemy to crazy damage. And the last boss was just based entirely on that. I remember it being like super stressful, super fun. My first game I got on the GBA, and definitely always remained one of my favorites, was WarioWare, the first WarioWare. I loved the second one and the third one, which I realized on a Game Boy Advance game. Like I loved all 3 of those: the original, Twisted, and Touched, and kind of like wasn't as enthused with the series after that, but I loved those games. The first one I put so much time into, was really trying to get the high scores. I was just like so gleeful at the idea of the game.
WarioWare is incredibly fun. A couple others I forgot to mention. We didn't have A Link to the Past on our Super Nintendo until much later. that we ended up getting a cartridge really for the sake of collecting. But my first exposure to A Link to the Past was on the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance port, and I love that port. It's so cool having that really important, influential game portable. And then the first Mario and Luigi game, I don't really find myself laughing out loud at games super often, but that game just had me at times just cracking up laughing. The writing is so good. It's just incredibly funny. The little animations of Mario and Luigi are just so good, and they're talking. They're kind of fake Italian, and
it's really good.
It's great.
Yeah, I actually don't find Fawful very funny. Like, he was kind of fan favorite, right? Like that villain. But I still think it's a really funny game. The voices that they do, and even do you remember even the menu screen, like the equipment screen, when you're going back and forth between them. You can see the Mario Brothers shoving each other out of frame.
And then the dancing, with I can't remember who's doing what. I think Luigi is pumping his fists and Mario is sticking his butt out, and they're doing it together.
It makes me so angry that we were one game away from having the whole series on 3DS. Because they remade the original Inside Story, and then I think there's 2 or 3 original Mario and Luigi games on there. The only one that's not on 3DS that was remade was Partners in Time. That was it.
Well, you could still that was a DS game though, wasn't it?
Doesn't matter, doesn't count.
So you could whatever.
I want a remake. I want them all. Although I do think that the original style of
I'm glad we have the entitled gamer representation on the podcast.
Anyway. I love the art style in Mario and Luigi. I think they did a really good job of transitioning it into this sort of pseudo 3D that they did for the 3DS games. But the first 2 had just that really beautiful style. I think Bowser's Inside Story was also on DS, is that right?
I believe so.
So Partners in Time and Bowser's Inside Story, I believe the art style is still like the Game Boy Advance one. And man, they were just so. I prefer, not just in terms of gameplay, but visually, I prefer the Mario and Luigi games to the Paper Mario games.
For me, I mean, the original Paper Mario is fantastic, but Thousand Year Door is one of my all-time favorite games. That is another game where I just remember just genuinely, actually laughing out loud at some of the writing. And some of the writing, too, Nintendo probably wouldn't do today. Like there's that, what is his name, that wrestler? I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head, but I think he calls Peach a broad. They would never have that piece of writing today, but it's so damn funny just imagining this dude flippantly calling Peach a broad.
I should give one of the first 2 Paper Mario games another chance at some point. They didn't click with me in the way that Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga did, and I think Mario and Luigi is funnier, and like the dialogue aside, I think. My favorite scenario in any of the Mario RPGs, from any of the various ones, is in Mario and Luigi when, I think Mario is, comatose and Luigi is terrified to do anything about it, and he has to get hypnotized into thinking that he's Mario in order to complete a quest.
Yeah.
So good.
I think Minish Cap, I think, is really, really good. It's one of my favorite of that style of Zelda game. I actually think that I'm drawn more, just a little bit, to Fusion over Zero Mission. I can't really tell you why. I know Zero Mission is amazing, and don't get me wrong, I love it, and it skews more to the classic, just you're not being guided. Not very much, at least. I didn't mind the talkiness of Fusion. I actually found Fusion interesting because there's this creepiness to it. Zack kind of mentioned the horror element. The SAX and how it doesn't pop up at random. Every time it appears, it's scripted. As far as I can tell, I've never had it in any other sequence but the ones that I've repeated 1,000 times now. But the way it would pop up and just felt so overwhelmingly powerful was pretty awesome. Especially because if it's essentially just Samus, right? Because it's her armor, you're kind of thinking, so this is what it feels like for everything you destroy in each game when Samus shows up.
And it's cool because it's the fourth game. And so, like, everyone who's played the Metroid games to that point has gotten to the end where they have this, like, got the Varia suit and the screw attack, and, like, they know how powerful Samus is because they've gotten to control that.
Yeah,
it's turned against you.
And I think that her redesign's kind of neat too. I don't think it works as well in GameCube in Metroid Prime on GameCube because you can bring the costume in if you connect the games with the link cable. But on the pixel version of it, she just looks super cool. And then each, just seeing what color it changes to each time, that was all fun. And then some of those bosses, I mean, besides the SAX, there's that one freaky knight. I think it's called Nightmare. It looks like a kind of like a TV head almost, and it's like oozing. Like, that thing was so creepy. So I love Fusion. I think Drill Dozer is really clever. It for those
who made that,
Game Freak made it.
Oh yeah,
it's one of those oddball Game Freak non-Pokemon games, and so it has really beautiful graphics. The pixel art's awesome, and then it has this interesting gimmick of the cart has a built-in rumble pack, and so you can choose to turn it on or off. But if you have it on, it extends slightly out of your system, no matter which system you play on. Game Boy Advance, Micro, whatever. It'll rumble as you're using the shoulder buttons to use the character's drill,
and you can like drill in or out, right?
Yeah,
reverse the drill. That's actually another like last thing for the Game Boy Advance compared to other systems, because like obviously the DS or the Switch, like other systems have cartridges, but they don't have the weird hardware that was built. So you had this with Drill Dozer and the rumble built in. You had Twisted with the gyro, and you had Boktai with the solar sensor, right?
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate that weirdness.
Yeah. One game that I was into, total like flash in the pan moment, and I just abandoned it and never went back, and I don't know why, was Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced. I remember I was super into that game. We had the strategy guide. I was using it. I remember like just being so into that for just the briefest moment, and then it just went away. I don't know why. I don't know why I never went back to it.
I liked that game, and I was excited to play it, but I ended up being frustrated by it in my case. Like, it does definitely suffer in comparison to the original game. I know you haven't played Final Fantasy Tactics, but that game is not perfect, but nevertheless kind of a masterpiece. And the biggest changes between the original Tactics and Tactics Advance, one is that it's just a more kind of like kiddie story, I guess. It's like you get whisked away to this magical world. But the other thing is there's this weird system where they have like judges going around. So you're playing like tactical battles, but you can get red carded and have your characters like taken to Final Fantasy jail. And it's just frustrating because it ends up being kind of like really prescriptive about how you approach a battle, depending on what the rules are that particular judge is enforcing in that particular battle.
Well, I think I need to amend my first statement from our conversation, which is now that we've sat and talked about it for a while, really it was a pretty experimental era of like Nintendo and all these other different game makers. I had said experimental was the wrong word anyway, but I mean, that's not even remotely true. I mean, just the use of like the sensors. I mean, Game Boy had games like that. Like you had a gyro control for Kirby Tilt and Tumble. There's different game packs that would throw these gimmicks in, but with Game Boy Advance, like WarioWare Twisted's brilliant in terms of the way the gyro's used. And then the sheer variety of games, and I'm kind of forgetting, Zack's talking right now and Angela about Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, and I remember when that game came out, I'd never played a tactical game. The only thing what drew me to it was the pixel art. Like, it looked incredible. I'd never seen a game with that sort of detailed art like it has. But when I started playing it at the time, I didn't like it because I'd never played a tactical RPG. I was like, wait, so the game's this beautiful, but I can't actually move around in the environment? And that bugged me. And so I think I mentioned this in the first or second podcast, but when I got to college and then I started experimenting with games, the Game Boy Advance was still there. It was like at the very end of its life cycle. And so GameStop had all these different used and still new Game Boy Advance games. So that's how I found like Mario and Luigi and Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which are great, but I think still more in my kind of traditional wheelhouse. But about 5 years ago, I think it was now, I started doing a deep dive into the Game Boy Advance library. And I started looking just for, like, specifically, I would type in hidden gems or looking up ports that I didn't know existed on it. Like, you can get Final Fight to play on that console, which I still need to get.
You picking up stuff like Sigma Star Saga?
Yeah, so Sigma Star, that's how I found Saberwolf. All these just different games. And you know, really, like, at this point now, I have a pretty massive Game Boy Advance collection in terms of the games. And thinking about my favorites, I mean, there's the obvious stuff, but then there's these also just quirky little games. I actually prefer Gunstar Superheroes to the Genesis original. That game blew my mind when I played it because it looked incredible, because Treasure's just so nuts with, you know, making graphics look really good. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's a really, really fun platform. And I think the fact that it was still plug and play, you know, just boom, you turn it on and you're playing. I mean, that went away with the DS. And it's, you know, it's not like it's the most horrible thing, but something about Game Boy Advance represents the sort of end of this is just play games.
Yep.
Put a cartridge, play a game.
I agree with that.
You know, Zack, before I forget, you are such a big Advance Wars fan. I don't think you talked about it.
No, I haven't yet. That was Advance Wars 2, Black Hole Rising. Was, I think, alongside WarioWare, one of the first things I got for the system. I loved it. I think, you know, I did enjoy Advance Wars, and I did enjoy Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, and I kind of, not soured on, but did cool on Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, but I remained a huge Advance Wars fan. Went back and picked up the first one. It was one of my favorite games on the DS, Dual Strike, the first sequel. I was a little bummed by the second DS game, and have never gotten over the fact that it's been, I'm not even sure exactly, I think like 13, 14 years since the last Advance Wars game. And every time Nintendo comes out with another Fire Emblem game, I'm thinking, like, it should have been you in the ground. Like, Fire Emblem should have been dead and buried. Advance Wars is better in every way that the two games are different. There's no, like, relationship waifu nonsense. There is no having to level up your characters. You don't have, like, the defensive play encouraged by having permadeath. Like, Advance Wars is so wild, so fun. God, the three Wars World games, the two on the GBA and the one on the DS they're some of my favorites.
I actually kind of wonder if those games have been placed to the wayside, because Intelligent Systems makes both, right?
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if part of it is that they just don't have the resources to do two, and Fire Emblem's now this massive money maker. But I also wonder if maybe because of the military themes, that's part of the reason Nintendo said we're not going to focus on it anymore. I mean, there's plenty of war games, of course, but just in terms of how Nintendo is, I wonder if they're like, this is a little too close. Yeah, like, it might incite controversy.
That's part of what's cool, though, is like, it's got this like candy-colored coating to it, but I mean, as you may be aware, like all the little chibi war machines in the game, all the fighter planes, the tanks, are actually like based on like real life, like actual, like people can like match it up. It's like, a lot of like the Blue Moon stuff is from Soviet machines, and a lot of like the yellow comet. A lot of the Yellow Comet stuff is from like Imperial Japan. And so forth.
That's like, I don't know, Nintendo makes those weird kind of mandates. Nintendo like ran a piece talking about how by the time you get to Wii, that game didn't have a Mario Golf title. And I think when it did get tennis, I think it was a new play control. But they never ended up making Mario Golf for Wii. And you would think they would because of the motion controls.
Like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And so apparently that is the only console since Game Boy Color or something that Camelot didn't make one of its sports games for Wii or something like that.
Hmm.
And so what they ended up doing is they basically made what would have been Mario Golf for Capcom. And Capcom published it. And so it's a Camelot golf game with Capcom characters that you can play as in it. Or they're like outfits you can wear. But it's not Nintendo.
Even better. I want to play as Arthur from Ghouls and Ghosts Golfing.
I think actually he might be one of the costumes. I ordered it because it was super cheap on eBay. I was like, oh, I've never heard of this game. Now it's in the mail. That's the kind of thing I love. Like, that's what I was doing with Game Boy Advance, where it was just like, what are the obscure rando games that I don't even know about? Because, like, the Castlevania trilogy is awesome on Game Boy Advance. And and then kind of speaking to what we talked about earlier, how this was where 2D transitioned, because it was basically kind of blacklisted from console.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for Game Boy Advance, we wouldn't have gotten the 3 really good Symphony of the Night style Castlevania games. Now, I know you prefer the original style, Zack, but, you know, for the rest of us, those Symphony of the Night style Castlevanias were awesome. And then the Sonic Advance trilogy is really good. It's like Sonic has that kind of bad, you know, what's the word? Reputation now because of the spotty games that come out. But the handheld games have been pretty consistently good. And starting with Sonic Advance to 2 to 3, those all have a similar feel to the classic Genesis games, but, you know, just a little bit different, and they're really fun.
I don't have as rosy an opinion of the Sonic Advance games. I didn't try them. I think the Neo Geo Sonic game is better.
Oh, that's amazing.
And
I don't know if I'd say it's better, but it is amazing.
And I don't know. I remember it's been ages since I played it, but I think Rush was better than the GBA games also. Sonic Rush on the DS.
Rush is cool. Rush really emphasized speed. I mean, it's right in the name, right?
Yeah, I feel like all these games, though, are just like, they're fine. Like, it's just hard. If you think about Sonic and what you want out of a Sonic game, you need more screen real estate. And
I
like
don't like Sonic.
Putting this man on blast. Talking Sonic, I hate.
What of it? No, but like, right? You want. Look, the times I have gotten into Sonic games, it has to do with like they're huge stages and a ton of different ways to go. And part of what makes obviously part of that is you're supposed to replay the stages, but part of what makes it work is you can see ahead of you, like you can see more of the screen, and it's just the GBA and Neo Geo games are a little bit. Let's say not as good as they could be, at least. And I know sometimes it's hard to get either of you to admit that something is bad if it's associated with a brand you like. But like they really want more screen real estate than they have.
I don't know about that. I mean, if you ask me, those portable games kind of demonstrated how you can do Sonic without the need for that larger scale. Because I had so much fun, and I didn't feel like I was being robbed of anything because the screen was smaller. I mean, let's face it, Sonic games are not the 2D Sonic games. It's not like they're totally on rails, but they kind of, to a certain extent, are. Like, you'll get into a certain path, and then for certain segments of it, you're just going around. You do the loop-de-loops, the whatevers, and then there's a point where maybe you can find a branching path. And the Game Boy Advance games pretty much did that. I think that maybe they probably leaned a little bit more on the on-rails parts, just to maybe get around the fact that you couldn't see as much of the game world. But
right, that's
they're really clever.
That's why they're not as good. Take it from me.
The Sonic hater. The Sonic hater. You know which games I actually want to go back and play? Because I never did. For some reason, I just did not play them at the time. Are Kirby and the Amazing Mirror and Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland. I didn't play either Kirby game on the Game Boy Advance, and I feel like I really do want to go back and give those a try.
Is Nightmare in Dreamland the remake of Kirby's Adventure? Because I think one of the handheld Kirby's was a remake of the NES game.
That might be the one, because Kirby and the Amazing Mirror is the one where they have like their little cell phones that look really cute on the cover.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think Nightmare in Dreamland is a remake of the first game. That one gets some hate for some reason. I thought both of them were fun. Those Kirby games are pretty cool. I'm trying to think what else we got. I know that there's the 2 remakes, but the 3 mainline Pokemon games, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, those are all pretty good too.
Yeah, they're all right.
I think the remakes are better than them, but those were cool.
You know, another small tangent that I won't spend too much time on, and I don't know why I didn't bring this up in the Pokemon episode. I have this
We didn't do a Pokemon episode. You just tried really hard to turn the Ports episode into a Pokemon episode.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm confusing my writing with podcast material. Pokemon is a series that I have this overall great love for, but a lot of frustrations with. And Ruby and Sapphire and Emerald was where I started to feel conflicted about the series, and I really didn't care very much for a lot of the Pokemon from that gen, and it just does not capture the love that gens 1 and 2, or does not capture the things that I love about gens 1 and 2.
I think part of the problem is that for me, the GBA was when I started with Pokemon.
Okay.
So yeah. I don't have that same feeling when I play them, because that's when I first started playing them.
Yeah.
They were so, Pokemon was so dominant for half a decade by the time the GBA games came out, right? So there was a lot of time for people who grew up with it to get a real strong sense of what the world of Pokemon was from the Kanto and Johto games.
Absolutely. And I remember the starters from that game, because I had gone with the Fire Starter for both gens 1 and 2, and then get to 3, and Torchic was okay. I didn't strongly dislike Torchic, but I didn't love Torchic, but I definitely preferred Torchic over Mudkip and Trico. And then, I don't know, just something about those games that, like I said, there are parts about Ruby and Sapphire I really like, and then parts that I was just kind of lukewarm on. But no, I mean, overall, they are good games. Absolutely.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't take this opportunity to discuss the 2 great Klonoa games that were on Game Boy Advance. Now, a little bit of what makes Klonoa unique was lost, because the whole point of Klonoa was it's a 3D world with 2D gameplay. But they managed to snatch the feeling of the PlayStation, the original PlayStation version, and put it on Game Boy Advance, and so fun.
Apologize for the squeaking noises of our cat in the background.
Yeah, she's been lurking this whole podcast trying to kill all of us.
She's been in a weird mood.
She's, not to deviate from the point of this podcast for too long here, but Zack and I have a cat. Her name is Olive. She is an incredibly emotional and oftentimes irritating cat, but then at other times she's incredibly loving and affectionate. Unfortunately, she's in her irritating mood right now, so if you hear the hissing and then the whining in the background, it's getting close to her feeding time, so she's irritable. But feel free to ignore her.
She's a rescue. She's never quite learned civilized cat manners.
No.
Before I forget, just in case the cat noises drowned it out.
Back to Klonoa.
Yes, it feels so much like the PlayStation game, but it's all 2D, which is fine because the gameplay's super fun.
Do you know how much kibble I had to slip Olive so she would cut you off when you started talking about Klonoa? Wow.
I'd also like to say that whether or not it angers the people at this table is irrelevant to me. I will be at some point in my life plunking down whatever it costs to get a copy of Ninja 5.0.
Oh, that's a great one. Have you played Ninja 5.0?
I have not. I know it's a Konami secret gem.
That's a great one.
Konami.
It's there's a lot of Rolling Thunder DNA in there, like the doors, and no, it's great. It's great. I don't. Last time I replayed it, I didn't love it as much as I did back when I played it on GBA, but it's still a really solid game. I would rank it under the Treasure games, but still pretty up there. The one game that we haven't mentioned that I would be remiss not to mention,
Iridian 3D.
No, it's trash.
Oh, not at all.
Is Rhythm Tengoku, which only got a Japanese release, but it's the kind of game that is fairly playable even if you don't know Japanese. It's just, it's I think it was by the same. I think it was the same team as WarioWare. Even if I'm wrong on that, it has the same kind of like bite-sized, random whatever ethos that WarioWare does. It's really cool. There are so many tiny songs in that game because like they're all small stages, whereas like most rhythm games would have like a full 2-minute, 3-minute song you play through. In Rhythm Tengoku, they're much shorter, but they're all like super catchy, super interesting, and it's just incredibly charming. I loved the first Rhythm Tengoku especially. I didn't like the one on DS as much because you're supposed to play with the stylus, and it's just, I don't know, playing a rhythm game with a stylus can work. Oendan and Elite Beat Agents work, but
that one was all just, timing based with the taps. It wasn't really any different than using a button. I mean, it's just instead of a button, it's the tap.
With Rhythm Heaven on the DS, it was usually more swiping, I think, and I found that to be like a little less. I don't know.
It was swiping. I love the Rhythm Heaven games. I think it's odd that they brought WarioWare and then we're just like, they're not going to want this one. It's like they're different, but they're in the same kind of,
They got WarioWare has like the branding strength of like an established character, right? Whereas Rhythm Tengoku is a little more like, look at these wacky Japanese things.
I don't want to forget it because it's something that maybe someone here can answer for me. I love WarioWare 4. But I think there's been like a whole book written about how like its level design is like one of the greatest designed games ever made, and I've never quite understood why.
Wario Land 4?
Yeah.
I played some of it. I didn't really like it, frankly. I didn't get that far into it, so I couldn't really tell you about like the majesty of its level design. But like I kind of like the with a Mario game, Mario is like so joyful to control, just like running and jumping. Even if the stage was entirely featureless, no goals whatsoever, there's still something fun about Mario. For me, Wario Land doesn't have that. Like it's fine. It's not like unpleasant to play, but it didn't grab me because I didn't find Wario that fun to control.
I remember liking that game a lot. I think it has some incredible pixel art. I just, this is me being lazy. I've never just taken the time to sit and read why it gets that kind of consideration. I mean, it is interesting because I need to go back to the Game Boy Color games. The first Wario Land, I think, is completely different than any of the other ones that come after. I know that the second one and the third one, I think they both introduced the mechanic where Wario can't actually die. Mm-hmm. That, like, just bad things happen to him and it, like, alters his shape or his abilities. But one of the games, and I don't know if it's the fourth one, but there's this idea of you get to the end goal or the objective towards the end of the level, and then you have to rush back to the start of the level. And so it takes these elements of the stage and changes or alters them a bit so that even though you're running back through what you already came through, now you're taking different routes or going different directions.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe that's what it gets props for, but I really have to look into it. It came into my head just now. I was like, I better bring that up since we're talking Game Boy Advance.
Going back to the point you made, Zach, about WarioWare versus Elite Beat Agents, as someone who played both, I was definitely in the camp of I don't really care for Elite Beat Agents because it was just a little bit too weird, which says a lot given how weird WarioWare is. But WarioWare, I also just thought was way more fun to play, way more interesting, way more engaging. Elite Beat Agents was just a little bit too odd for me. It could definitely be fun and was challenging at times, but I think WarioWare just is just a better game overall.
Yeah. I have pros and cons for Elite Beat Agents, but we can save that for the DS podcast.
Okay.
What we absolutely have to do now is round 3, the finale of the Marrujo Trivia Challenge.
Oh, jeez.
All right? Buckle up. All right. 4 of the games in the art style line of Wii games were previously released on GBA under a different line. What were they called as a set?
Art style?
The art style games? I didn't know they were on Game Boy Advance. Did Nintendo publish them?
I believe so.
Something else in that to search.
Got me on the list. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Bit Generations.
The Bit Generations games are technically the art style games?
There's a lot of overlap. There are 7 Bit Generations games. I don't know how many art style games, but 4 of the Bit Generations games saw Second Life in the art style line. The Orbital is one of those. I don't remember what the other ones are. Okay, next question. Early in its development, the Game Boy Color was planned to be much more powerful, akin to a GBA. What was the code name of this project, in the same way that Dolphin was the code name for the GameCube?
I don't know that either.
Project Atlantis.
Oh, okay, I've heard of that.
Yeah. I've heard of that.
All right, let's see if we can turn things around.
Is this the last question?
We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
The team that made JRPGs like Shining in the Darkness on the Genesis and Beyond the Beyond on the PS1 went on to make what GBA classic?
Say that one more time.
The team that made JRPGs like Shining in the Darkness on the Genesis and Beyond the Beyond on the PS1.
Angela Golden Sun?
That is correct.
Very good. 2 points to 1 point. And you can tie it here.
Only one of the first 6 Final Fantasy games is not playable on the GBA. Which is it?
Robert? 3.
That's correct.
Because it's 1 and 2, and then 4, 5, 6, right?
Why not 3? Is there a reason for that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there were a number of things they were weighing, but on the Wonder Swan, they re-released Final Fantasy 1, I think, and 2, and then 4. They didn't do 3. So they ported those Wonder Swan games over to the GBA. They did 1 and 2 as the Dawn of Souls double pack. They did 4, added some content to it. And then, because the market for 4 was more interested in 5 and 6 than in 3, they went on in that direction. Didn't remake 3 for that system. Of course, 3 then got the 3D remake for the DS.
I have that.
Yeah, and then 4 got it too, correct?
4 also got the remake.
I have both of those for the DS.
There are a lot of versions of 4.
I think I have all, excluding the Super Nintendo one, because I have 4 for my Game Boy Advance. I have the remake for 3DS, and then I have that crazy PSP one that is, it's the Super Nintendo one, but with like a prologue and an epilogue.
The complete collection on PSP.
And then I think
which has redone graphics, but still 2D.
But didn't that end up on WiiWare as well?
So not exactly. What WiiWare had was the After Years, which is this weird like mobile phone game sequel. It was an episodic mobile phone game that got ported to the Wii episodically. The PSP got Final Fantasy IV: The Complete Collection, which had Final Fantasy IV itself and all of the episodes of the After Years.
And there's one more thing on there that's
called the Interlude that takes place in between Final Fantasy IV and the After Years. Here's the secret. The Interlude is garbage. And the After Years are garbage. Like, it's all terrible. I cannot tell you how disappointing all of that was when I finally got around to trying it.
So would you say just the original Final Fantasy IV is the version to play?
There are a lot of versions of Final Fantasy IV that are good. But whichever one you play, if it comes with the Interlude and the After Years, do not touch them.
I remember being disappointed. This is vaguely, it's handheld adjacent. When I got my PSP, that was the first Sony console I ever had. And I remember going into PSN, I was like, I could download all these classic PlayStation games. I ended up getting Final Fantasy 6, I think, and 4, and Chrono Trigger. And I remember launching Chrono Trigger and being super disappointed, realizing this is full of load times that the Super Nintendo version didn't have. So it's like kind of a waste.
As I understand it, the PlayStation versions of Final Fantasy 1 and 2 are really good versions. But yeah, the Super Nintendo games, the PlayStation can't hold the whole thing in memory, at least the way it's coded. So it has to keep checking the disc. It's really unfortunate. But, really, a shopper should do a little more research. If you had done any checking for reviews or anything related to Final Fantasy Chronicles or Final Fantasy Anthology, you would have found complaints about the load times, especially for Chrono Trigger.
This was the early days of the internet for me.
If the PlayStation Portable was on the market, the internet could well have answered your question.
No, back then when the PSP came out, actually using the web browser on that was some of my first times, like just recreationally using the internet. Because we didn't have a computer in our house with internet until I think it was 2003 or 4.
Sounds about right.
And so...
But how are you downloading things off the internet then? Like, you must have had home internet, but no computer to use it with?
No, because the PSP would have come... I got that around 2004, because I got it after I graduated high school, so that was 2004.
Okay.
And that is a good question of where I was downloading it. I don't think we had Wi-Fi at the house.
No,
So I think I was downloading games at school, like at the college.
Well, in general,
a better use of your time.
Like a life lesson to carry forward is to, before you buy something, try and determine whether it's worth buying.
Well, I mean, to Robert's point though, like 2004. I mean, in 2004, I turned 14 and I wasn't doing anything on the internet but I don't know, fanfiction.net. Like, I wasn't looking up game reviews or, checking what do people think of this game before I buy it. I was just...
Yeah, 2004 was interesting because... So, when I graduated high school, there was a comic shop down the street from our school, our high school. And I was majorly into comic books, and I did love video games. But... I'd say by the time I started experimenting with all those Game Boy Advance games and then I got a PSP, I started transitioning into realizing I think the games are what I love more. And I had this moment where I was accumulating too much stuff because I eventually started working at the comic shop and I was buying every single issue, the trades, and I was just like, I can't afford, nor do I have space to have all the comics and comic book collectibles and the games and the game collectibles. So I made that fateful decision, and I was like, I'm dropping the comic stuff. So I still read some comics, but the gaming took over. So from 2005, for a few years beyond that, I think the only thing I was looking at on the internet would have been comic book news and maybe some video game things here and there, but I was still reading Nintendo Power. It wasn't interesting. It's a long time ago, but it's not that long ago. But it feels like a lifetime has passed, just in terms of.
Sure, it's a long time. Mm-hmm. I've always been really into video games. I just never saw why that would translate into me trying to buy all the video games.
I'm a historian, my friend.
Need enough to play.
I hate Google Stadia, and I still got it just to say I actually experienced it, so I could talk crap about it from
Yeah. All right.
No longer a subscriber, by the way. Take that, Google.
Let's maybe hold in our hatred, stew on it, let it transform us, and for now, maybe call it a day. It's been about 7 minutes, as the kids say. Any last thoughts anyone wants to share? Best kept to yourself. This has been the 7 Minutes podcast. Thanks for joining us. See you in another 20 for the next major anniversary episode for the Game Boy Advance.